And here's a great video to share with you related to the Dasamsa, the D10 of Vedic Astrology. This video was created by one of our astrological apprenticeship students, Desi. She has been working towards completion of this program for quite a while. She's one of my top students. Her native language is not English, so that's all right. Be patient with her. You probably wouldn't really be able to tell so much within the video, but she does an excellent job describing how to understand the role of the D10, the Dasamsa, related to a person's status, career, power, and ability to impact the world. Now, this is not necessarily a video for beginners, because part of what she is supposed to do with this video is share what she has learned during the time studying the full curriculum at Asheville Vedic Astrology. But there are wonderful insights within the video. So if you've got time and you can take some notes and you can explore what she's talking about, you'll find what is actually necessary, what is required for an astrologer to do in order to fully grasp the impact of the D10 and how it relates to the rest of the chart. The Vargas was one of the most interesting courses to teach, because there is so much that you can do with the Vargas. However, they are simply an expression, an extension of the Rashi chart. They are not charts within themselves. But you'll find that out as you'll see Desi going through this D10 chart. And again, she does a really wonderful job tying in the full scope of what you need to know and do to read the Dasamsa, the D10 chart well. So, without taking any more of your time, let's hear what Desi has to say.
In this video, my main focus is going to be to share with you a process of interpreting the Dasamsa. It is going to be a video in 3 parts. In the first portion of the video, I'm going to speak to the purpose of the Dasamsa. Then I'm going to give a brief description of each planet and what it represents in the Dasamsa. And finally, I'm going to list a few steps and principles, procedures that I'm going to apply to an example chart analysis. The 10th divisional chart relates to the fruits of one's activity within life. The Dasamsa is an expansion of the 10th house within the Rashi. It is related to things associated with the 10th house, such as honor, status, worldly power, fame, positions of authority, cruel deeds, good deeds, deeds and actions that benefit society or not, depending on the influences that we find. The 10th house in the Dasamsa is the primary house to look at because it shows the karmic impact that we have on the environment around us, or how do we influence the society that we are a part of. The results in the Dasamsa are going to resemble how well did we aim, how well did we stay committed and focused, which is seen from the Navamsa, and then how we translate this purposefulness through our activity in the world. The Vargas show the inner understanding of what happens to us as we walk the path in relationship to the Vargas, and the Dasamsa reflect our inner understanding of what happens as we fulfill our duties and perform the actions that we were meant to in the world. Most of all, the Dasamsa can show with what kinds of activities are we going to have most success. The Dasamsa reveals what do other people see about us, what is most noticeable about us, what do other people hear about us, so what we are famous for, generally speaking. And this is going to be reflected in the Dasamsa by seeing what planets are well placed by house and dignity, as well as what planets are placed in angles. These are the planets which we are going to tend to feel like taking more action with. And finally, the Dasamsa shows what will be our status as a result of the karmic momentum and free will, which we actualize in relationship
Saturn
to
is the primary planet to look at in the Dasamsa. It indicates our capacity to do the difficult and tedious things to attain greatness. It shows our eagerness to do the hard work for success, and if we're able to appreciate those things that are accomplished. Saturn is the planet that will do whatever it takes to succeed. It is related to qualities like determination, patience, and the ability to structure and organize our lives so that the creative energy, as represented by Jupiter, can flow through and express itself through us. The house that Saturn is in shows us where is our duty, and it calls us to put our attention towards this area of life. This is usually where we are meant to serve in some way or another. This is so true also because Saturn is a natural ruler of the 10th and 11th signs of the zodiac, which shows us that Saturn speaks to the specific contribution that we came here to make to the society and the world that we live in. Saturn shows our innate weaknesses. It points to the areas of life or the things in life where we make mistakes, where we're not taking care of things, or generally where we are meant to take more or many responsibilities. As a karaka for sorrow and endings, Saturn can represent fall from position. The Sun is a planet of consistency and inspiration. The Sun in the Dasamsa represents the consistency with which we perform our duties within the world. When strong, it may indicate an inspirational desire to achieve something great. The Sun is a planet that may give us the ability to attain positions of fame, status in life, and authority, especially when strongly placed by sign and dignity, and strong in Shadbala. In these cases, the Sun can denote the capacity to organize others and the skill in holding administrative positions, especially in government. Jupiter is a planet of wisdom and seeing the bigger picture. In the Dasamsa, Jupiter gives insights about the level of happiness and enjoyment we derive as a result of what we do within the world. Jupiter is also related to our morals. It reveals the nobility with which one acts in the world. When Jupiter is in a sattvic sign like Cancer, Pisces, Scorpio, the person is more likely to act in a noble manner. Influences towards Jupiter and the 9th house help us determine the enjoyment that we derive as a result of fulfilling our mission. However, the ability to stay true to a path, how well did we aim, is seen from studying the Navamsha and specifically the influences towards the 9th house and Jupiter in the Navamsha. That is why before we make conclusions related to the 10th Varga, we need to have studied the entire Rashi as well as determined the life purpose and one's ability to stay true to their intentions from the 9th Varga. Mercury is a planet that deals with one's capacity to manage power and authority. It represents friendliness, ability to relate, and capacity to get the best deal out of situations related to our activity within life. If it is emphasized within the horoscope, it can give a flair for business and trade, especially if it is associated with Venus. One is able to build partnerships and relationships on equal footing. Otherwise, Mercury denotes professions that require mental agility, mental flexibility, analytical ability. It is associated with mathematics, accountancy, and engineering. It denotes trading business deals, as we have mentioned, as well as advising and counseling and astrology. Mercury is specifically related to the way we communicate what's on our minds, how we engage with others. Mercury is usually non-judgmental, so in its highest expression, he's going to relate to others in a way that makes them feel like they are met where they are. Mars signifies energy, potency, action, and motivation. Mars in the Dasamsa shows our capacity to act righteously on our path towards success. It can represent our rising in life primarily through our own effort. Mars is a planet of the fire element, and as such it may require of us to take risks and to act courageously for success. The moon is the planet in the Dasamsa which defines our visibility. Its state can reveal to us whether we will be socially recognized. It can show how comfortable we are with our accomplishments as well as how adaptable we are to the nature of our path of activity. Whether we are sympathetic to the public or famous for cruel things and deeds can be prompted from the state of the moon in the D10. Venus is the planet of worldly fulfillment. Its motivation for worldly success or accomplishments often derives from the desire for equality, beauty, love, appreciation, and a sense of belonging. Venus in the Dasamsa relates to our diplomatic capacity, and it can indicate the sense of meaning we have with our work, as well as the ability to make decisions that lead to higher fulfillment in relationship to our status. It can signify a vocation in the fields of finance, fashion, beauty, or the art. The following description about Rahu is from the Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 1. Rahu is said to behave somewhat like Saturn. Rahu indicates diplomatic jobs, jobs requiring the manipulation of facts and dealings that involve poisons or drugs. It signifies cheaters, pleasure seekers, and insincere and immoral acts. Rahu can cause us to push ourselves to the limits in order to fulfill our desires and ambitions. Rahu carries an energy of worldly desire and represents, according to its placement in the chart, how and where our desires, karma, are most easily converted into deeds, karma. Rahu, the dragon's head, is associated with the power of the mind, separated from the heart energy, compassion, and thus easily leads us into worldly illusion. In the right measure, the energy of Rahu can lead us to worldly accomplishments, but if overemphasized, it can create insatiable desires. Ketu is like Mars. It brings to us a quality of intuition and a sense of knowing, which comes from our instinctual nature. It may point to inherent skills from the past, which we actualize in the world, or which might be relevant to what we do as a profession. Also, in the Dasamsa, Ketu represents our criticalness, self-criticalness, and our critics. Usually, Ketu's energy is directed towards inward search, towards self-knowledge. Ketu can bestow wisdom and discrimination and non-attachment to worldly desires. We will begin by considering the influences towards the 1st and 10th houses as primary houses for the Dasamsa, as well as the houses which activate the Dasamsa but also any Varga. These are the steps and procedures that we will be applying to examine this particular Dasamsa. However, we can add more mini steps or we can skip steps depending on how detailed we want to be with our assessment. Generally, a well-supported 1st house and well-placed 1st house lord show that there's lots of power available for the person to put towards their chosen path of activity. The Rashi aspects tell us whether the field which represents the foundation of one's career path is well supported. The sign and the grahas influencing the ascendant show the qualities and skills that we most readily put towards success. For example, in this chart case example, we see that this individual's activity is going to grow out of the skillfulness related to Virgo, the sign in the ascendant, and Mercury, the planet in the ascendant. What does Mercury represent as a Karaka and house lord? Mercury is the manager. Mercury rules the 10th house and the 3rd cusp, so it is related to skillfulness, some artistic ability. Virgo relates to one's capacity to manage one's day-to-day activities in an organized fashion, which allows the person to feel like they've accomplished a lot at the end of the day. Jupiter and Mars, Rashi aspect the 1st. We need to consider the natural qualities of both Jupiter and Mars. What do they represent as house lords? in the Rashi, as well as what do they represent as house lords in the Dasamsa. I'd like to highlight here that much of this process is a search for confluence. We make a parallel between the influences and the information derived from the Rashi with the influences that we find in the Dasamsa. For example, after we have examined the Rashi, we have noticed that Jupiter is the 9th house lord. Then, considering the Dasamsa and Jupiter's placement in the Dasamsa, we notice that Jupiter is in the 9th sign and with the 9th cusp. That's enough confirmation for us to conclude that this person feels fortunate, at least to a degree, to the degree that other cruel influences allow it to express its fullest potential. This means that the concrete expression of gaining wealth, for example, because Jupiter is a planet of wealth, is going to be felt on an inner level as joy, because Jupiter is also a planet of enjoyment. Then we consider the dignity of the first house lord. In this case, Mercury is exalted, which helps the person grow their status with more ease and grace, because Mercury is a gentle planet. Then we consider what does it mean to have the first lord in the first house. This is the Bhava Yoga related to the first house lord. Generally, we tend to feel the drive to take action in relationship to the planets placed in angles. Additionally, it's more likely that other people see us engaged in the activities related to the planet in question. Here is a line that I've put under all of the steps that I have mentioned so far. These are calculations and information that we derive from the actual birth chart. It is the Rashi where we find the actual alignment of the planets as they occur in the sky at the time of birth. Considering the Shadbala, the planetary influences, the Lajitadya Vashtas, is going to allow us to be more accurate with our interpretation. The final step relates to the yogas, any planetary combinations that we found in the Rashi and that are relevant in the Dasamsa. For example, we find that in the Rashi, Jupiter is in Scorpio, therefore Mars delights Jupiter. In the Dasamsa, we find that Jupiter is with Mars in Sagittarius. Therefore, we consider what does it mean to have this association in Sagittarius, in the 4th house, and so on. With the 10th house, we can follow the same procedure as we have applied to look at the 1st house. The sign in the 10th house gives us a sense of the nature of this person's career, and in this case, the 10th house in Gemini indicates a career that requires of the person to utilize their capacity for trial and error in a way that they improve their strength and skillfulness. Mars Rashi aspecting Gemini reaffirms that. Gemini is also one's capacity for self-expression, as well as it speaks to the way that we develop our courage. So we consider the Rashi aspects towards the 10th and the natural qualities of the planets influencing the 10th. In this case, the qualities of Mercury, Mars and Jupiter are going to play a primary role into the way this person approaches status and achievement. For this person, status is being able to be skillfully engage and manage the day-to-day activities as it relates to Mercury, the capacity to manage, and then being able to see the bigger picture, to make plans ahead, to have a vision of what will contribute to success in the future as it is related to what Jupiter represents, and finally being able to command right action at the right time, a quality related to Mars. Then we consider the placement of the 10th house lord by house and sign, and this means that we would like to see the 10th house lord in an angle or a trine or the 11th house, for this to be 10th house lord which bears the fruit of a successful career. But this is not the only one thing that we need to consider for a successful career, and it depends on what do we mean by successful career. But for fame, we need to find which planets are placed in angles. Then we might choose to consider particular house lords from the Rashi and to find their placement in the Dasamsa. And this is going to show us, again, particular engagements of the individual related to the house lord from the Rashi. And the step which is under the line is about the yogas, and certain planetary combinations can give rise to yogas, but I'm not giving much attention to this particular aspect of interpretation in this case, so I just put it under the line there. In order to determine one's strengths that influence one's greatness, it's very helpful to find the planets in good dignity and placement in the Dasamsa. We need to consider the natural qualities of the planets under consideration, and we can check that at any point of our assessment, even before considering Rashi aspects towards the 1st and the 10th houses. But in any case, this is something that we usually notice as we go through the procedures described for the houses. The opposite is true as well. Planets in difficult dignity, that would be planets in debilitation, in great enemies or enemies dignity, and placed in the 6th, 8th or 12th houses, are going to show the weaknesses that influence one's greatness, or the things that present themselves as obstacles, as things that get in the way of achievement. Finally, for a successful career, we would like to see the karakas for the 10th house well dignified as well as well placed by house.
Before we begin looking at the Dasamsa, let's make some general observations about the Rashi to get a sense of what this person's life path is about, and then it will be going to be easier for us to make a parallel between both Vargas. First, we see that Cancer is rising at the time of birth. An active water sign, the sign of foreign travel. Mercury and Venus are in the ascendant. And what do those planets represent? Mercury is the planet of communication. Venus is the planet of love and appreciation. Both together, placed in the ascendant, give ease with which one communicates their needs. Also, both gentle planets are interested in improvement, in getting better. So the person is going to engage their energy using the qualities of the gentle planets to improve upon their emotional comfort, well-being, their health. But also they're going to be involved in exploring some skills, like artistic skills. Mercury is the actor, or he can be related to acting, dancing, etc., because he's the third, the natural ruler of the 3rd sign. Venus is the planet of artistry, so definitely we see some creative capacity here. Most of all, there is an emphasis on the number 4, and Venus is the 4th house lord placed in the 1st house, together with Mercury, who is the karaka for the 4th house, placed in the 1st, and both of those grahas are in Cancer, the 4th sign of the zodiac. So there's definitely an emphasis on the acquisition of comforts like vehicles, homes, and enjoying long distance travels, because Mercury is the 12th house lord in the 1st, etc. Now moving on to see if there are any other Rashi aspects. Jupiter from Scorpio is Rashi aspecting the 1st house, bringing a sense of optimism. Jupiter often makes us feel like we can see further, or we can see the bigger picture in regards to the area that it influences. And generally, we know that Mercury and Jupiter are the sources of strength according to Gemini. So they're certainly going to help the person manifest their desires, to manifest their vision. These gentle influences towards the ascendant are going to feel like protection. They're going to be like a protection because there are some more difficult influences in the Rashi which can be mitigated or softened a bit from the fact that 3 benefic planets Rashi aspect the ascendant. Moving on to see the Bhava Yoga connected to the first house lord. The moon is in the 7th house, and we see that this is a bright moon. The moon is in the sign of activity, which corresponds to the 10th house, Capricorn, which tells us that the person is engaged in growing their status. They're engaged in business partnerships. Also, the Karaka for the 7th house is in the 1st, which reaffirms that being connected with others, trade, is a large part of what this person's life path is about. Now let's move to consider the 10th house in Aries. Aries in the 10th house. Looking at the Rashi aspects, we find that the Sun from Leo is Rashi aspecting the 10th, and also Saturn from Leo is Rashi aspecting the 10th house. Jupiter is Rashi aspecting from the 5th. 3 of the 4 Karakas for the 10th house, Rashi aspecting the 10th house. One of the things that this could mean is that the person engages the qualities related to those planets in their activity in the world. For example, they grow their business using Jupiter. They get involved in speculative investments because Jupiter is in Scorpio and in the 5th house, which makes one inclined to take risks in business activities, and generally the person tends to be more courageous in testing their luck with Jupiter in a trine, and also in the sign of Scorpio of other people's money, which is also represented by the 8th house. Interestingly, Saturn is a Karaka for the 6th house, and Jupiter is the 6th house lord. The Sun is the 2nd house lord, Rashi aspecting the 10th. What we observe here is the interconnectedness between the number 2, 2nd house, 6th house, and 10th houses. So there is a focus on Artha, or maintaining responsibilities. So I'll stop here now, and in the next portion of the video I'm going to consider the Karakas for the 10th house in the Dasamsa. So we are going to be looking at Mercury, Jupiter, and also Saturn and the Sun.
Virgo is in the ascendant in the Dasamsa, and Mercury is exalted in the 1st house, which tells us that one of the strongest qualities about this person's path of activity is the capacity to focus on the practical, mental things required for success. In this case, this person's authority is built upon his ability to manage and organize effectively. Also, Mercury brings in a capacity for commerce, and generally it allows the person to enjoy playing the game of success. We see similar influences in the Rashi. As we have mentioned, Mercury's association with Venus in the ascendant in the Rashi brings in trade wisdom and the capacity to get the best deal out of situations. And this is translated as an influence in the Dasamsa because Mercury, Rashi aspects the 7th house, which is going to help the person see opportunities for business, and it is going to help the person communicate effectively with his business partners and the people that he relates to in their field. The manifesting planets, Jupiter and Mercury, Rashi aspect both the 1st and the 10th house. Considering that these planets bring about the manifesting planets, Mercury and Jupiter, Rashi aspect both the 1st and 10th houses in the Dasamsa, which helps the person bring about concrete achievement in the material world. Most certainly, this individual has a sense of what it feels like to have accomplishments, to make things happen, and to achieve success. This is also supported in the Rashi, where we saw the sources of strength influencing one's path and body in a similar way. So this person knows achievement and success. The fact that they are capable of utilizing the potential of both benefic planets is seen from a few angles, and it is particularly interesting to see the recurring theme of growing one's skills through training and self-effort, because Mars influences the 1st and 10th houses as well. So I'll try to explain this. Looking at the Rashi, we see that Mercury rules the 3rd house, related to our skillfulness, but it is also related to self-expression, the expression of creative and artistic skills, and it is related to physical prowess, which is developed through training and exercise. And similarly, Jupiter rules the 6th house from the Rashi, in the Rashi, and it is placed here in an angle in the Dasamsa, influencing the 10th and 1st houses, influencing in fact Virgo, the 6th sign, which is related to the way we physically integrate our energy on a day-to-day basis. So Mars is a karaka for both the 3rd and 6th houses, and that's how it brings in this idea of daily effort to improve upon one's skills and then presenting those skills to the world. Because how do we keep up to our daily engagements? Through daily routine and self-discipline and self-effort. And in this case, the person has developed unusual athletic skills, athletic abilities, and they are also an actor. Unusualness is related to Rahu. So to conclude, the 1st and 10th houses, tied respectively to signs 6 and 3, bring in the themes of service, duty, training, and fearlessness. Mercury as the 3rd lord in the Rashi becomes a significator of bravery, bringing together the idea of working hard on one's talents and being courageous in presenting those skills to the world. It is interesting to look at Mercury throughout the other divisions. We see that Mercury is in the ascendant in the Hora, in the Drekana, in the Chaturtamsha, in the Saptamsha, and Mercury is with Jupiter in Sagittarius in the Navamsha. Both manifesting planets influence all the other angles through Rashi aspect in the Navamsha, which tells us that there's a sense of purpose with where this person is going in life. It shows that the person has the capacity to walk a narrow path, which is then easier to be seen and noticed by others when this person translates this purposefulness through their activity within the world, as seen from the Dasamsa. When it comes to Shadbala, Mercury holds the highest score, overall score, and Mercury is particularly strong in its Digbala. Mercury has high percentage of Digbala. So although Mercury is in great enemy's dignity in the Rashi, the fact that it has strong Digbala or directional strength allows the person to take action to improve upon the skills required for success. And thanks to that, this allows the person to keep moving forward until success is accomplished. But what is getting in the way of Mercury is the moon. We see the Lagitadya Vashta of the moon thirsting Mercury here in this table. And the moon represents one's emotions, one's emotional investment in success, the moon in Capricorn, one's personality, one's investment in the outcome, in one's status. So that's what gets in the way of this person's capacity to experience the desired level of contentment. The moon is also thirsting Venus, which is the Atma Karaka. We know that because Venus holds the highest degree within the Rashi amongst all the other planets. There's a similar flavor of experience. The moon in Libra in the Dasamsa carries over the Lagitadya Vashta from the Rashi. The downside to that is that the person may seek validation by the public, and the person might try to better their sense of self through attaining Venetian things. We can tell that the person is in a way disregarding what in their heart and consciousness feels right to focus on at a given moment, because Venus and Moon are away from the fourth house where they would gain in directional strength. So that's how the person stays away from true fulfillment. After all of that said, no wonder that most of this individual's occupations have mercurial qualities to them. He has written many articles, he has published a few books. Also, they have been a spokesman and a politician, sharing their ideas with others, trading ideas, and they have also been involved in the promotion of environmentalism. At the same time, they are a successful businessman. Finally, let's mention not only the manifesting planets Mercury and Jupiter have the highest dignity in the Dasamsa, but they are also the lords of the nodes in the Rashi as well as in the Dasamsa. Mercury rules Rahu and Jupiter rules Ketu, which further heightens the karmic pull one feels to work on their status. And such confluence tells us that one has the promised potential to learn well through trial and error as required by Rahu in Gemini and connected with Mars here. Additionally, Mercury is ruling the 10th house, as we have mentioned in the Dasamsa, and Rahu sometimes tends to multiply things. Gemini is a mutable sign, so this shows in this case that the person invests themselves into multiple avenues of activity. This person is very famous for being extremely wealthy. Most of the activities through which they find their gains and wealth revolve around Jupiter, Mercury, and Mars, and also the areas that those planets rule and influence both in the Rashi and in the Dasamsa. Going back to the Rashi, we see that Mercury is the third cusp lord and the third house lord related to personal desires. Mercury is also the fourth cusp lord related to wealth. Mercury is with Venus in the ascendant, and Venus is a planet of finances and also a planet ruling the fourth house of wealth and the 11th house of gains. Both planets are in Cancer, a sign related to the accumulation of wealth, of ideas, and of strength. Also, Jupiter is the 9th house lord from the Rashi, and Jupiter is placed in the 5th house, which makes it a double significator of wealth, because Jupiter is a karaka for both trinal houses and it is a karaka for wealth. And as such, it is also influencing the 11th cusp and also the 10th house. So Jupiter placed in Scorpio speaks to fortune through risk-taking. And Jupiter's dispositor is Mars, who is the 5th and 10th house lord from the Rashi, which makes it a Raj Yoga Karaka. The delight of Mars towards Jupiter gives a sense of self-esteem through one's associates and enhances one's courage. The yoga related to both planets is translated in the Dasamsa, where Jupiter is in Sagittarius with the 9th cusp together with Mars in the 4th house. So this supports this person's contentment derived from his activities and status. It also solidifies one's potential for wealth above and beyond what one needs to meet their needs from the work that they do. Additionally, Mars is a karaka for youth, Mars is a karaka for property, and all the things that Mars represents, like taking risky endeavors, entrepreneurship. These things are going to be growing and expanding because of Jupiter's influence over what Mars represents. And the union of both planets in the 9th sign speaks to one's ability to share wisdom with the culture which they are trying to influence and that they are a part of. This person is also involved in cultural, educational, and community enrichment programming to youth. Looking back to the Rashi, we find Jupiter in the 5th house, influenced by Mercury and Venus, which is a great support towards Jupiter, and this is certainly going to help the person find plenty of opportunities for business. On the negative side, though, both benefic planets are thirsting Jupiter, which might cause a sense of loss of sight of the bigger picture due to over-optimism. Also, the Sun is delighting Jupiter. We saw in the beginning of our assessment of the Rashi that both the Sun and Jupiter are Rashi aspecting the 10th house, which additionally helps the individual feel a sense of purpose with maintaining their status and fortune. And going back to the Dasamsa and speaking to the connection of Jupiter and Mars in the 4th house influencing the 10th house in Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury, who is exalted in the ascendant, further indicates benefits from speculative investments. And indeed, as far as I have researched this person's biography, they have invested their bodybuilding and movie earnings in an array of stocks, bonds, privately controlled companies, and real estate holdings. Looking at both primary karakas for the Dasamsa, we see that they are placed in the 2nd house in the Rashi. Saturn is the 8th house lord, and as such it represents one's weaknesses and liabilities and the psychological battles that one has to go through to gain stability and to become resourceful. Saturn starving the Sun in the 2nd house of early childhood experiences shows that most likely this person has experienced emotional wound, which has affected their self-worth very profoundly. And in order to bring their self-esteem in balance, this individual had to be decisive and to work hard on developing and then expressing their talents with confidence through their activity in the world. And we see that because Mars is the 10th house lord, is placed in Gemini together with Rahu, this tells us that the person is meant to develop skillfulness related to Mars, to develop strong character and integrity, self-esteem and confidence with which to perform their actions in the world. The fact that both karakas for the 10th bhava and the 10th varga aspect the 10th house in the Rashi, which indicates that this person resolves the difficulties related to the avashta of Saturn starving the Sun in Leo in the 2nd house by learning how to maintain their stability and resourcefulness. In fact, they alter this sense of lack to their self-worth through growing and learning, through their activity, through their active participation in the world, which as a result allows them to shine and to gain status and position. In fact, also we see the 11th cusp in Aries here, Rashi aspected by Saturn and the Sun, which shows that one's engagement in social activity, in Aries kind of activities like initiating new ventures, charging forward, claiming leadership, taking risks, and so on, help the person bring their self-esteem into balance. Looking at the Shabdvala, Saturn is the weakest in terms of Shabdvala. Possibly this is one of the reasons why this individual was often the winner in the battles with his enemies, which Saturn as the 8th lord represents. The 8th house and the 8th house lord respectively represent the battles with one's enemies. And in the Dasamsa, Saturn is in Scorpio and Saturn is placed in the 3rd house. The 3rd house represents competition, similar to Mars, and it also represents the beginning stages of one's career. Saturn is together with Venus, with the 11th cusp. Venus is in friend's dignity. Venus is the planet of finding meaning with what we do in the world. This association here of Saturn and Venus shows that the individual had the grit and the courage necessary to put in the effort required for success and finds meaning with attaining their goals, attaining their gains, the 11th cusp, through competition, 3rd house. Possibly the significant delight from Jupiter towards the lord of Saturn, Mars, the dispositor of Saturn, Mars, further contributes to smooth out the difficulties that Saturn, by its very nature and also house rulership in the Rashi, is going to present to this individual. Because Mars is in an angle in the Dasamsa, and it has strong directional strength because it is close to the 10th house, but let's look at the Shadbala. The percentage of Digbala is strong enough to allow the person to overcome obstacles through action. In fact, the Sun also has strong Shadbala score. And overall, the person is going to thrive in their life because the Sun is so much more powerful in terms of dignity and Shadbala in comparison to Saturn. Also, the Sun is going to withstand the difficulties because it is consistently strong throughout the first 5 Vargas. So at least 50% of the time, the person is going to have the capacity to intelligently meet the responsibilities related to their work. And to a certain extent, due to the strength of the Sun, this person is able to maintain their power and status despite the setbacks and weaknesses that Saturn indicates. The harmony of the Sun is further sustained by the impact of its friends. The Lagitadya Vashta of Mars delighting the Sun, however minor this is, intensifies one's bravery and courage with which one acts in order to attain their goals. And also Mars helps the Sun command its authority as well as take initiative towards actions that build confidence. At the same time, the Moon helps the Sun be more adaptable and able to be sensitive to the needs of others. In fact, this is reaffirmed by the fact that the Sun and the Moon are together in Libra, the sign of others, and we saw that the Moon is in the 7th house in the Rashi. So this allows the person to have an outstanding political career because they can take care of others in the process of achieving their goals. However, the downside is that the Sun is debilitated, and this very strength can turn into a weakness because what is the downside of a Sun in a sign ruled by Venus? Venus is interested in making everyone happy in the process of accomplishing things, and the Sun is a planet that is interested in the outcome, in doing the right, the honorable thing that is going to accomplish the greater goal, the greater vision of a larger group of people. Apart from that, this individual has been able to follow their own lead and to achieve the positive indications of this Bhava Yoga of the 2nd house in Leo, ruled by the Sun, and Sun in its own home here in the 2nd house. Respectively, through growing their kingdom of financial security, their self-worth becomes steady. To speak to the association of the Moon and the Sun in the Dasamsa in more detail, we see that the Moon rules the 1st house in the Rashi, the Sun rules the 2nd house in the Rashi. The Moon rules the 10th cusp in the Dasamsa, the 11th house, and the Sun rules the 12th house. So these influences emphasize one's income generated by solar deeds like government service. Further, they tell us that a lot of this individual's energy gets wasted in maintaining their responsibilities with their profession. The fact that Mars, as a lord of the Karma Bhava, is placed in the 12th house of loss and expenses also speaks to that. Finally, Mercury, ruling the 12th house in the Rashi, is starving Jupiter, who is a Karaka for the 2nd house, which we are considering, and also the 10th house, which further causes losses due to micromanagement. There is no doubt that both Saturn and the Sun have caused great deals of stress in regards to this person's capacity to maintain their course in life. Most certainly, there has been the need for sacrifice of enjoying of those areas of life influenced by the cruel planets as fully as one would have liked, and perhaps that was the price to pay for this person for being able to become who they are now. The bright moon is in the 7th house, which allows the person to remain adaptable to the changing circumstances within one's career, the moon in Capricorn. And in fact, this is exactly what Rahu and Ketu, influencing all mutable signs in the Rashi and in the Dasamsa require of this individual. Rahu in Gemini in both Vargas that we are considering requires of the person to learn to discern what activities and what ideals are going to serve one's path in life or higher purpose. So the nodes of the moon require of this individual to become flexible or to be flexible while having to attend to many responsibilities. And we see here that the rulers of the nodes, both Mercury and Jupiter, influence the four angles both within the Dasamsa and within the Navamsa, which tells us that there is a solid sense of support towards one's path in life and towards one's career as well. And this is seen from the Rashi as well. One's path in life is very well supported by the sources of strength, as we have already mentioned in the beginning of this video. So how do we know if the person is going to derive a sense of satisfaction from their activity within the world? And I hope that I'm not repeating myself too much, but finally I'd like to bring our attention to the planets in highest dignity within the Dasamsa. And we see that Mercury is exalted, Jupiter is in own home dignity. Jupiter is the 6th and 9th Lord placed in an angle in the Dasamsa, which shows that more often than not, this person's activity is going to bear fruit. And Jupiter is connected to the 4th house, which shows that this individual derives fulfillment from being able to influence their culture and to serve the society in their own way, through their own skills. And in the long run, they are able to be content with their activity and status. In fact, by growing through the difficulties in regards to their path in life, learning through trial and error, through their work, they maintain their status and they are able to alter their destiny for the better. The Rashi and within the D10. This allows the individual to uphold his status throughout his life, as well as it allows them to experience success. It is important to be through the appropriate time period that also matches the age of the individual, as well as the alignment of the planets within the Rashi and within the Varga that we are considering. When all of these stack up, a certain experience unfolds, which of course needs to be triggered by the transits as well. To begin with, this person was born in Venus Dasha, which has activated the yoga for wealth because Venus is the 4th and 11th house lord placed in the 1st house with Mercury, which is the 4th cusp lord. Both planets mutually delight each other. During Venus Dasha, at about the age of 14, this person started weight training, and it was then when he chose bodybuilding as a career. His first professional competition was in Venus Dasha, Venus Ketu Dasha, and Venus is in the 3rd house, both in the Navamsa and the Dasamsa. And what does the 3rd house in the Dasamsa represent? It shows the ability to do what is logically correct for success in the world, similar to the meaning of Mars, but it also represents the beginning stages of one's profession. Let's resume what strengthens the promise of the association of the 11th and 3rd house lords in the ascendant in the Rashi. First, Venus is placed in the 3rd house in the D10. Venus is with the 11th cusp. Venus is in the 3rd house in the 11th sign in the Navamsa. In addition to that, in all the 3 Vargas that we are considering, the Moon and Venus are connected. Both planets are self-factors, which speaks to this person's worldwide recognition for their efforts and achievements. Finally, because this person has been through Venus Moon and Venus Mercury Dasha, has allowed them to make use of the association of the benefic planets. After Venus-Mercury Dasha, their career grew quite steadily, and they went into Sun Dasha, when their goal was to become the greatest bodybuilder in the world. In fact, in Sun Dasha, they have experienced the peak in their career as a bodybuilder. And why is that? The Sun is the planet of status, authority, and steadfastness. The Sun in the birth chart is the planet in highest dignity, with strong Shatbala. The fact that the Sun is debilitated in the Dasamsa does not negate the attainment of high status and positions of authority. In addition to the strength of the Sun, we see that the Sun Rashi aspects the 11th cusp in Aries, as well as the 10th house. The Sun Rashi aspects the 7th house in Capricorn, and the Sun is in the 7th sign with the Moon in the D10. The Moon delights the Sun. The Moon Rashi aspects the 11th house in the Rashi, and the Moon rules the 11th house in the D10. Also, the Moon rules the 10th Bhava cusp, so it activates this individual's popularity, because this is a moon which is moving towards full. It has served to raise this person up in life, because the moon is also a planet of growth. So we see a lot of emphasis on self-growth, because the moon is the ascendant lord as well, and the planet of growth through one's engagement with the public, through one's profession. They reached their peak in their career in the early 70s, and the end of Moon Dasha marked the end of their bodybuilding career, when they won the competition Mr. Olympia for the last time. Although he gradually moved from bodybuilding to acting in Moon Dasha, it was in Mars Dasha in 1982, Mars-Jupiter Dasha, when he made his first breakthrough as an actor. This is no wonder, because Mars is in Gemini, the sign of artistic ability, and as we have mentioned, Jupiter is very well placed in the Rashi and in the Dasamsa, and it delights Mars. Fast forward to Rahu Dasha, when this person began his political career. Rahu is with the 10th house lord and the 5th house lord in the Rashi. Rahu is in the 10th house, which supports the attainment of positions of authority, and this person began his political career in Rahu Moon Dasha. As we have mentioned, the moon is with the sun, and the sun has a similar meaning to the 10th bhava, as it represents positions of authority, honors, status, as well as authority figures, government officials, government work. This person ended his political career in Jupiter-Mercury Dasha, and Mercury is thirsting Jupiter. As far as I know, after that, they have returned to their acting career. I'd like to mention that we have been focusing on the favorable experiences as they relate to the time periods and the planetary influences at the time of birth. There are many nuances that we haven't gone into, as well as this person has experienced ups and downs, rises and falls, which were a part of his path of activity. But what I have been trying to illustrate is how the astrological factors have allowed the individual to be able to sustain his worldly engagements with dignity